And I'm so grateful that he's here tonight, and that I believe we're about step 4, step 5 in that area, like step 5. So if you could, let's welcome Peter.
All right.
Sure. You need water or anything? You need anything? No, I'm good. Okay. Okay.
Okay. My name is Peter. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Excuse me. Grateful to be alive and sober and part of a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, thank Ray for allowing me to be here, the group for allowing me to be here. And February 11th, Ray's getting married. Congratulations to Ray. All right. And before we get going, there's just something on my heart. I walked in, and there's 2 gentlemen here, Chris and Carlos, who I knew when they came into treatment. And they're still here, still doing the deal. And I remember when they met, Chris didn't say anything, and I couldn't shut Carlos up. And they're 2 sober gentlemen, as I like to say, with lives and families. And so I thank both of you for coming down here and being part of this meeting tonight. And it's really, when you get to see folks come in, whether it's Park Avenue or Park Bench, the internal condition looks like a junkyard. And little by slowly, we see these folks battle their own demons. And then one day you kick back and they have their lives. And they don't lose their connection to Alcoholics Anonymous. And as an elder, if you allow me to say that, all the work you do, you see the fruits of the labor. And so I thank both of you. I saw a little picture of you guys Saturday, and I was banged up just waiting to get to the emergency room, and it was wonderful. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. My better half was trying to talk me into staying home tonight. I had this ridiculous accident on a bicycle, spent Saturday in the hospital with a concussion and just banged up ear and a lot of scrapes and bruises. I think my ego got hurt more than anything. But I told Marion, I said, I just got to get around some drunks. Even if I wasn't speaking, I just want to get around some drunks and just hear a story, just to do what we do. And so when Ray says he'd rather, nowhere else he'd rather be than a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I totally get that. Mary and I share often how our favorite place to be sometimes is in some old church basement with a rotten cup of coffee, and it's an AA meeting, and we're good to go and work on some new drunk who's falling apart. And that's what God allows me to do. And there's a time it wasn't like that. June 23rd, 1988 was my separation from alcohol. And on June 23rd, 1980, I had no plans of being where I'd be right now, quite frankly. No plans of being sober. Because the voice in the head, the critic in my head, my sponsor always tells me, we all have a critic, was telling me, who are you kidding? And even when I was starting to feel good about being sober and feel good about being part of Alcoholics Anonymous, and even feel good about having $5 in my pocket, but I took a shower and had breakfast, my voice would tell me, the critic would tell me, but you're Peter Marinelli, who are you kidding? And was always looking to undermine and pull the carpet and take my legs out from under me. And several times it did. I'd be a liar if I didn't. It worked on me many times. My second sponsor, Mark Houston, who's gone home to the big meeting in the sky, told me, well, he used to call me Money. He says, Money, he says, I thought I had the most evil voice until I met yours. I mean, this is unbelievable. How do you even deal with this? And I said, I would drink. That's how I would shut it down. What I found out in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in recovery, that just going to meetings and being in recovery does not shut those voices down. In fact, it doesn't even shut the voices down while we're sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because every time I take a leap towards getting better, my illness makes a bigger leap trying to pull me away from recovery. And something changed for me in 1988. Prior to 1988, the things you guys asked me to do to get sober were cumbersome. They were tasks. They were frustrating. I didn't want to really go to any lengths. And if you're sitting here tonight and you haven't run out of road and you're in that place of wavering and having a double mind and not really wanting to do whatever it takes to get better, no matter what it costs, no matter what the cost is, the price of salvation is, then the things you get asked to do in recovery seem to be really, really a pain in the neck. It's too much to ask. A meeting every day, perhaps. My sponsor wants me to go. Perhaps my sponsor wants me to call him 3 times a week, go meet him 3 times a week. And, oh my God, this 4th step. The first time I did a 4th step, I was done in a few days, and it was long. I hunkered down and wrote. I wrote and wrote. My sponsor says skipping a meeting to write inventory will not get you drunk. And I just kept writing. I see some cats in AA that are on inventory for 2 months. Where are you? I'm still in the 2nd column. They built the Empire State Building quicker. But if Flacco was around the block, you would have been there 3 hours before he arrived. And so that's how I was taught. But prior to 1988, I didn't want to really get into this because I had other plans, and my track record proved it. In 6 treatment centers, I came up with 2 days of continuous sobriety over a whole bunch of years. There was no going to meeting, get a 30-day chip, and, oh, you know who picked up Pete Marinelli. There was no such animal. I didn't even get a white chip. Because I'd come here drunk and had plans on if I got here, I was leaving anyway and get drunker. Until 1988, and everything started to change. There was a shift in here. This was still treacherous. This wasn't going anywhere. And all it does on most days is go dormant. I don't kill off the mind. We get to grind the ego into dust. But something happened in 1988 where the things you were asking me to do, I welcomed. And the bulldog sponsors, the bulldogs in AA, the drill sergeants in AA, who I backed off of or I pushed back on if I would meet them. Or the H&I folks, when they would come into treatment and they were gung-ho and passionate about recovery, I backed off of them. It was a cult to me until 1988. And those are the people who appealed to me and I was attracted to. Something else changed in 1988. I wasn't looking to have a rehab romance when I was in treatment. Prior to that, I was looking to find the next Mrs. X. I was going to get with somebody who was going to make my world great. In 1988, that got pushed aside when I got into I couldn't even deal with that. Quite frankly, I couldn't even deal with life because I was so busted up. God broke me down enough. And the big book says that alcohol beats us into a state of reasonableness. And just when it seems like the lights are going to go out permanently, the light starts to shine. In our, if you will, weakness, in our shortcomings, in our falling short, in our brokenness is where we find strength. And it isn't the strength that comes from me, it's the strength that comes from God. Because at that point I know of myself I am nothing but the Father doeth the works. And the only place I can turn to is this God. That doesn't mean I'm super excited about, I'm going to turn to God and find the Lord. Amen. That's not the way it went for me. It was the last house on the block. It was get God or drink and die. So I wasn't one of those guys who ran to God and say, praise Jesus, I found the Lord, I'm reborn. That's not my story. I got to that place, and for the most part I keep it here unless I'm asked to give testimony or if someone talks to me. But me finding God was the last house on the block because I had so much contempt and anger towards God. But he knew it because he created me. Like he knows what's going on with every one of us because he created us. And as my sponsor said, just go back to the manufacturer. You run into every place else except the company that put you together. And so that's what I had to do. And for many of us, we never get there. We die. And that's how we get sober. That's how we never drink again. We die. So God interrupted my death more than a few times to get my attention, to put me on a course, to put me on this journey, to put me on, give me these tasks to do for him, not for me. My recovery is not for me. I mean, I get the benefits of recovery. My recovery is not for me the same way my life is no longer mine. Because when my life is mine, if I try to find my life, I will lose it. When I lose it for his sake, I seem to find it. It's none of my business. And isn't that a whole bunch of freedom? When I'm working for God and he sets me up where to go and what to do. Trust me, I'm not feeling really physically good and my ear is screaming. God says, go. Because before I got here, I was going to call Ray and say, Ray, I'm not sure what to do. And I told Marion if they came out of meditation, I need to get around drunks. That inspiration came from sitting in meditation for about an hour before. Father, what do you want me to do tonight? You know I'm tired. You know I'm a little banged up from a bicycle accident. What an idiot I am. How do you sound tough with that one? Hey, how'd you get hurt? I fell off my bike. Yeah. So I get here, and I get to do this stuff, and I get to talk about this work. My very first sponsor had put me through some tests to really jump through hoops. And I thought he was doing it purposely, just to test me, to see if I wanted it. Perhaps he was. But the information he got was out of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. There were people in my first home group who would, somebody would walk up to them and say, I'm your sponsor. Now, if that works for you, great. But nowhere in the Big Book does it say we do that. It works for some folks. We talked about spiritual consent, where the person had to go up to you and say, hey, can you sponsor me? That's spiritual consent. That's a verbal contract. I'm giving you consent now. Will you be my sponsor? Which means I'm giving you consent to call me on everything. And he says, before we do that, you have to read the preface to page 164. And I says, this guy doesn't like me. Why is he making me do this? Everyone else is already starting the steps. He says, how we're going to do it. He says, when you get to working with others, you're going to see how it says, on our first visit, we loan them a copy of the book. On the second visit, having read the first portion of this volume, we talk about some proposals. And that's exactly what we did. Now, if you don't do that, I'm not saying you're wrong. This is what we've done. Now, granted, there are some folks who have come to me over the years who have 2 days. There's a guy here tonight who met me on, we're at where I work. I think it was 4th of July. I'm not even sure. And he's in the back. I see him here. And he had 2 days. And he says, can you take me through the work? And I looked at him, and I heard 2 days. If I give him 164 pages, we lose him. So we went right, I was at work, we went right into my office. And we sat down and we began right there that night. I didn't have to go to a party. I didn't need to see fireworks. We needed to sit down. I got a drunk. Why did I come here? Not for the fireworks, to meet this guy. You know what's happened? He keeps doing the work. He keeps showing up to my office at Wednesdays. When he can't make it, he lets me know. If he's going to be late, he lets me know. And he keeps doing the work. We're about to do a 5th step. What if I said, call me in 2 weeks, I'll get back to you? I might be drunk. I don't know about him. So the things they put before me, my sponsor put before me, I did. I welcome them. At least someone for the first time in my life is giving me clear-cut, specific, precise, exact directions on how to do this. I went to a meeting in West Boca. I just got down to Florida. And I went with a buddy of mine. And he says, let's go to this beginner's meeting. You've never been there, so off we go. And the speaker got done sharing, and it went around the room, had a beginner's meeting, and about 10 people shared. And 10 people shared 10 different ways to get sober. And I looked at my friend and says, if I'm new, what do you do? Who do you choose? One from column A, one from column B. By the way, none of the reasons they gave were good. So I'm really glad that my first sponsor, a gentleman by the name of Tony N., said, you do this, and when you're done, you do that. If you want what I got to offer. If you want what I have, you do what I do. Now, a lot of us, we see the beauty of a transformation. We see the beauty of someone walking in the light. And although we're in awe of that, that coexists with a reluctance to do what they did. It comes by not doing assignments, late for your appointments, not picking up the phone, having to do other things instead of, like go to the beach instead of writing inventory. You have a first step problem. Going out on a date instead of completing an amends list. You have a first step problem because apparently it's not that important. Or taking 3 months to do a 4th step. You weren't a world traveler. You grew up in like Brooklyn. Stop. So I got it. And I began to, little by slowly chop wood and carry wood and go through this work and make a ton of mistakes along the way, quite frankly. A ton of mistakes. And there were times when I was lazy and wanted to cut corners. But I'm so grateful for these sponsors who held me accountable. And they probably saw something in me that I didn't, and that was a hunger and a thirst, no pun intended, to get well. Because I kept showing up. The depth of our willingness is always manifested in our actions. And I saw out of this broken person that I was, felt less than a man. Because all the people I knew growing up had families now. They were working on Wall Street. They had new cars. And I just came home from Minnesota living in a halfway house. I had, the money in my pocket, which was basically like maybe a couple of dollars, and that was it. And my dad was giving me $20 a week to live on, Mr. Big Shot. But something comes out of that brokenness. Once I got to the realization that I am flawed, I am broken, and that only with God will I be put back together, there's a tremendous amount of freedom I found in that. The realization of that allows me to turn to God, and we get to do godly things. Not God, but godly things. Because in my big book, it tells me we're agents for God. My book says that. Big book says we are agents for God. And what an agent does is represent the principle. So in short, we represent God in all we do. In all means all we do. So if I want to do God's work here, but in the parking lot I turn into Snoop Dogg, I'm not doing so good. I had a concussion. Give me some slack. Going right to hell after this meeting. So. I remember when I got done with my fourth step, and it was a lot of work. It was the first time, and my sponsor said, he showed me in the book where it says, nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. So I took that as a warning, and our book is full of warnings and promises and a lot of considerations. So I said, I better be thorough, and as I shared a couple of weeks ago, after trying to run it my way, I began to pray and things started to pop on paper. And I couldn't believe what I had written. It was there. I actually did this fourth step. And they were to take it to the grave things on there as well in the sex inventory, which, by the way, is the piece that gets almost every one of us uncomfortable. Not that the real uncomfortable things don't exist in perhaps in fear or resentment inventory or principles institutions. But everyone will get uncomfortable writing and discussing the sex inventory because we all have the secret. And what I found out, if there's a name for it, it's already been done. And there have been times I took a lead from my sponsor who did it with me. When I see someone getting uncomfortable with sex inventory, I'll just share some of my sex inventory with them and say, see, it's me too. You're not the only one who was selfish and self-seeking in the conduct. And they take a deep breath. Because like me, when they're sharing inventory, it's pretty free for the most part. Some delicate spots in there. But as soon as we get to sex inventory, the body starts to shift and we start to go into these contortion motions. And we start to whisper instead of talking. And we're looking at the floor and we're hoping like the sponsor just has a heart attack and dies. So we have to finish the thing, But there it is. It's on paper. And the one who gave it to me, gives it to us, is God. So we can consider it good, regardless of what it is. But the sense of urgency is what I look for as a sponsor. And my sponsor still holds me accountable. I'll speak to him, God willing, tomorrow night. And he might give me something to do. And if he doesn't call me during the week, we will speak the following Wednesday, and he'll say, how did you do with that piece I gave you to do? Now, I do it because I get to and I want to, but if I don't do it, he's going to hold me accountable to that. Now I have to answer. And now I feel like a hypocrite. So what's the sense of urgency to get done with the fourth step? What's the sense of urgency to complete the fifth step? To get me set up after 6 and 7 to go complete my amends because of the damage I did it. And only until then will I feel complete. Because prior to step 9, I'm going to feel incomplete. I'm going to feel broken. I'm going to not be firing on all cylinders. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be in the game. I'm going to be alert. I'm going to be awake. But I'm not there yet. And what the ego wants to do is say, you're good. You did the 5th step. You can rest. And our book knew that, because after step 5, they tell us 1 hour and get moving. And during that hour, it's not about hanging out. It's about doing some other chopping wood and carrying water. So I finished step 4, and I have to go to my sponsor. And I think I shared this last week. Each time I've done this, and quite frankly, even on Wednesdays when I call my sponsor to read inventory, sometimes it's uncomfortable. But certainly when I have to go do a 5th step, because I know we're going to be in there a while. And I know a lot of things are going to be uncovered and discovered, things that I couldn't see on paper. And the ego is going to hurt. That's why I get uncomfortable. But it's necessary. You got to shake it up to wake it up. And sometimes things that feel good aren't good, and things that feel bad aren't bad. But my sponsor's been hired, the hired agent, to navigate me through this maze of misery, quite frankly. And what I got to see in hearing myself talk is, how often do we manufacture our own misery? All the time. No one brings unmanageability to me. No one brought unmanageability to me, even with horrific things hanging around me. Isn't it? And here's the proof of the pudding. Some of us who are in this deal for a while have experienced some terrible things. Carlos had a terrible loss recently. Chop wood and carry water through it. Some of us will experience some tragedies, some bad things. And yet, because of the sober spiritual muscles, we move through it. Doesn't mean we like it. Yet compared to looking at the first time doing a 4th step, we couldn't handle any of it. I was angry, fearful, and drunk. That's how I did life on life's terms. What's the shift? It's the God shift. Where life still happens, life is still problematic, things still come at us, people disappoint us, people betray us, people die. Money comes, money goes. But with spiritual muscles in God, my hand in God's hand, somehow we move through it. Or we'll get pushed around, we'll get black and blue, we'll weep a whole bunch, but somehow we chop wood and carry water. The shift of consciousness, the God consciousness, is now alive within each one of us. The good news is when we were drinking and drugging, it was still there, but the pilot light was not turned on yet. And the way it gets turned on is I needed to run out of road. No reservations, no lurking notion, brick wall. And that's when God speaks through the brick walls. I get to step 5, some pretty cool things in here, and there's a line in here that my sponsor pointed out to me years ago that flies in the face of treatment, therapists, and psychiatrists. It says this: having made our personal inventory, step 4, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, step 2, a new relationship, step 3, with our Creator. One of the tricks that we do when we read this book, instead of saying we, I say I, me. Personalize it. And try to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We have put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. That's the brokenness we see. Most of that stuff we see in column 4. We're no longer living in column 2. How many of us live in column 2, where you go to a meeting and you know what they did to me, you know what they did to me, it goes on and on and on. Make 90 meetings in 90 days. It goes on and on and on. Most of us are living in the second column, and here we're discovering obstacles in here that are blocking me from God, column 4, and quite frankly, even column 3. It says, now these are about to be cast out. Could you imagine? You're sitting down with your therapist, psychiatrist, medical doctor, whatever he might be, and you say, after an hour, you say, now that you've heard my defects of character and shortcomings, here's $100, cast them out. They put you on medication. They think it's a voodoo thing going on. Our book says these are about to be cast out, because we're not going to turn this to a human power. A human power who's representing God right now is in front of me. But we're about to go to the power who has the power to cast them out. And only God can do that. I can't work on defects. It's like trying to swim in quicksand. I can't deal with my defects. They will deal with me. I can't let them lay around because they have friends. and they beget new ones. They need to be thrown out like bad garbage. And the only power that can do that is me going to God in a surrender and begging, quite frankly, for mercy. Because these are the things that are going to kill me. Because by the time we get to step 5, I'm not drinking. We're not drinking. We're clean and sober. Perhaps a few days, perhaps a few months, maybe it's the first time it's a few years. We haven't had any mood or mind-altering substance come into us, but yet the bedevilments own me. And my mind has taken me hostage again. And going to meetings doesn't remedy this stuff. What I need is power. Back to chapter 2, agnostic, lack of power is my dilemma. So with power, no dilemma. So I'm reaching for power, but it's a long reach. I can't really reach it because I got all this stuff in the way. And 4, we just swept it aside. 5, we're going to clean it out. And 6 and 7, any residue that's left is going to go too. So I have a clean path to God. That's when we get lit up, especially when we're making amends. These are about to be cast out. It says this requires action on my part, which when completed will mean I've admitted to God, to myself, and to another person, the sponsor, the exact nature of my defects. And a good sponsor will hold me accountable doing that 5th step. Ask questions. Be more specific. Considerations. What we do in my lineage, we pray before the prospect comes to the house. Because God's about to hire me to do this work. And later on it says that we should realize we're engaged upon a life and death errand. Life and death. That's step 5. Life and death. So if I've ever been faced with the life and death situation, I don't want to die. I'll do anything to live. Whether it's a gun pointed to you or almost drowning, whatever has happened to me, this is a life and death situation right now. Well, that's what the 5th step is. So as a sponsor hearing this, it's a huge responsibility God has given me. So we pray. And then we have a notepad and a pen in a big book. We make some prayer, and off they go. And what we do during this process, when inspired, take notes. Just little things that we hear being repeated over and over and over and over. And I've said this from a million podiums. We get to page 100 perhaps, and I say, hey, Joe, back on page 20, back on page 30, back on page 40, the same exact defects showing up, different places, different ages, different people, but it's the same you showing up. Do you see that? Do you see how when money's tight or relationships are bad, you act out sexually? Do you see how when success comes by, you go out and get drunk? Your ego shows up and you become pompous when things go good. And the same patterns. Your unwillingness to forgive people. And it goes on and on and on. And suddenly the whole thing becomes 3-dimensional. They get to look into their own inner workings, if you will. It also helps me as the sponsor when we get to 6 and 7. There's some assignments I like to do, just spiritual assignments. On the bottom of page 72, it says, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers and even old-timers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. The sins of omission. If I don't tell anyone, it never happened. If no one saw it, it never happened. There's a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Black Mass. And the lead is sitting down with, I think, his stepson. And he tells his stepson how to beat up somebody in school. And basically tells him, don't do it in front of anyone. He says, do it when no one's around, because if no one sees it, it never happened. This is how we operate in recovery. If I don't think anyone saw it, it never happened. But it did. I did it again. So my book is saying that time after time, I've tried to keep something to myself. And even an old-timer, what am I afraid of giving up to my sponsor currently? What am I holding on to? You know what's in the way of me letting go? Is ego. Shame. Guilt. Shame will have us go to white rage. Shame will have us break a chair. Shame will have us usually run out the door. Shut down, go in. put up the wall around us. So when we're being pushed through this work, the ego says, I'm not discussing the sex inventory. I'll give you a little bit, but I'm not giving all of it. When it comes to fear, the silly things I'm afraid of, have been afraid of, you're not getting it. Because you might think I'm less than a man. See, I think you're judging me where really I'm the one who's judging. It says, more than most people, the alky leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents a stage character. This is the one he wants everyone to see. You know, you walk into a meeting, I'm Moses. I'm Mother Teresa. Everything's good. I'm oming on the way into the meeting. I must show everyone how spiritual I am. I must tell you how much I know about the big book. And I will gladly tell you how long I was in meditation, even though you don't ask. But then catch me on 95 in traffic, or in Publix, or in the parking lot when she shows up. We're 20 minutes sober. I think I can sponsor her. It says this inconsistency is made worse by the things we do on our sprees. And I think all of us have had that. Drunk or sober, the hypocrisy, the inconsistency, claiming God with my lips, but my actions don't look very godly. At some point, the only thing that's going to shut that down is a drink. Because I have this dialogue in the head. I should be doing that, but I'm doing this. I should be doing that, but I'm doing this. And it gets so painful that only the power of alcohol or perhaps an opiate is going to shut that all down, where I don't care anymore. I'm a place of ease and comfort once again. I don't have to deal with that God guy anymore. I have to deal with that sponsor guy about suddenly this path becomes this real pain in the neck to me, and the inconsistency gets greater and greater and more painful and more painful. And what we're asking you to do is, if you run out of road, just follow directions and just unload it in the fifth step. How free do I want to be? It says down on page 73, again, I must be entirely honest with somebody if I expect to live long and happily in this world. Now, my Heavenly Father is going to determine how long I live. But what's the quality of the life while I'm here? I can go out and make lots of money illegally, do lots of things illegally, and have some joy for the moment and gain the world and lose my soul. I tried that route. Trying to get the external stuff to feed the soul, and the soul starves. The soul, I go bankrupt. And the only thing I deal with that is to get another drink in me. It's always about a drink. My brokenness doesn't want to write a fourth step. My brokenness doesn't want to share a fifth step. My brokenness doesn't want to take a look at 6 and 7. I can't do it. I'll never do it. I don't want to be bothered with this. And the ego says, let's not do this. It is dangerous territory. You're about to expose yourself. You're about to get really vulnerable. The ego doesn't want to get vulnerable. And most of us have walked around, and I'll say this freely, with shame-based stuff. Vulnerability is now the enemy. Intimacy is not going to happen. And when you do a fifth step, you're immediately made emotionally intimate with that man or woman sitting opposite you. It's a forced thing that happens. You have to become intimately, emotionally intimate at this moment, because you're sharing all of it. And if I have shame-based stuff in me, and an alcoholic ego, what an order, I can't go through with it. Thus, the sponsor has to walk me in, and create a safe environment. That's why we don't do fifth steps while we're going for a walk in the park, or while we're driving. You come to my house, perhaps come to my office. We'll meet someplace outside church, somewhere where it's going to help that environment, create an environment, so we both feel safe. Where else do we get selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, self-absorbed individual to have the spiritual transformation and take on the life of a servant? And the more we serve, the freer we are. My God was the biggest servant on the planet. You take that person and in the spirit of service, for fun and for free, get another drunk and spend a few hours hearing all of this. And we listen to it as if it's our life and death errand as well. Because at this point, when I'm hearing a fifth step, there are a lot of things that are monotonous, redundant. But I know if I'm not in there and trying to pull this person out, because God's given me the power, the endurance, the insight, the intuitiveness to pull this person out. And if I just kind of blow it off, he's going to stay sober. I'm in danger of getting drunk. And how dare I do something like that and then get on my knees and say, Father, please bless me for the day. What a hypocrite I am now. This might seem extreme for some folks sitting here. It is not extreme to me at all. What was extreme to me is chasing a bag of dope and a drink and going to any lengths and doing stuff like that. Finding myself waking up to people I wouldn't fly over today and getting myself in, volunteering to get into very compromising positions and situations and handcuffed and carted off to spend another time in jail. This, my reward is complete liberation from myself. Not from you, not from worldly clamors, but from me and the noise in the head. But what lengths am I willing to go to? What lengths am I willing? What's the price for salvation? The answer is any price. And as soon as I begin to push back on the sponsor or the elder or the teacher, I tell them you have a first step problem. You came in here bleeding out, and we will die from 1,000 cuts, not necessarily one wound. We come in here bleeding out, and then somebody presents us with a solution, and we say, hold on. I'm not ready yet. But you're bleeding to death. I'll go to another place. I'll get a second opinion. You think about it. I made 7 treatment centers. I know folks who are 21 years old. I'm in the treatment center business almost as long as I'm sober. I know folks 21 years old have been in 15 treatment centers. 20 treatment centers. How do you even pull that off? I don't know. Reserve a room for me. I'm going to be there for the next 5 years. Either you have phenomenal insurance or mommy and daddy are really, really, really rich. After that many treatment centers, I'm picking up another white chip. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, am I one of those folks in the big book that says we're constitutionally incapable of being honest with ourselves, which means honest with my condition, that I'm an alcoholic or an addict, whatever floats your boat, and I'm doomed to drink and drug regardless of what the consequences are in front of me. I will drink and drug. And the tricky thing about this illness, it tells me, no, you won't. Well, I'm going to cop. Well, I'm going to the bar. It says, no, you won't. So I'm really grateful for the step one that I got in here and my experience getting there on the way in here. The leveling of pride, the confession of shortcomings. I wasn't able to do that until I hit rock bottom. But I'm very much aware that the bottom I hit has a trap door waiting to fall. So our book says we get a daily reprieve, a daily stay of execution, contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. In short, if I get God and I seek to have a relationship with my Creator, I get a stay of execution. Even if I fall short in doing, I succeed. It's when I kick back and I don't have to do this and I can pick and choose as to what rules I'm going to follow, I'm in trouble. Serious trouble. Because I don't look as what they tell me any longer as rules to live by. They're principles to live by. And when I follow spiritual principles, I seem to have a spiritual outlook on life with all my shortcomings and all the cracks in my armor. There's something different about life. It's many years now, and I've had my back against the wall more than a few times because I got sober. Doesn't mean I hit lottery and everything's wonderful. Life comes at you, and life's unfair. I don't know how some folks do this without inventory, pen to paper. Guy sent me inventory via email one time. I sent it back. Guy came up to me with these pre-printed 4-step sheets. I ripped them up. How much lazier do you want to be? I mean, everything's instant gratification now. Xfinity on demand. Now I have a remote control. You don't have to press. You just Put on Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island goes on TV. Everything's quick. Shoot dope. Boom. Drink. Boom. Everything's quick. Will you tell a drunk, you mean I have to write? That's going to take time. Exactly. About 2 days and you'll be done. What's the price for salvation? Getting into the spiritual bunker and writing for 2 days. The reward is freedom. Or I can stagger it along and deal with, even while I'm not using, deal with the stuff. You know the stuff while you're not using? You're like a ball in a pinball machine. And until you walk into a meeting, you get back out to the parking lot, you start smoking different. The guys all of a sudden look like they've just been at the gym. Everybody walks around like this. You know, the whole thing, the whole dance. And God, who's God? I don't know who God is. Until you walk back into the next meeting, praise Jesus. Then you go back to the parking lot. We do this over and over and over again. Someone has about 35 white chips if you survive it. What kind of pain do we need till we finally listen? So I shouldn't say that. I'll never survive what I did. But I'm grateful for the bottom that I got. Because thank the good Lord, it's a few years I'm in this deal. God has kept me in this. And I'm still hungry. I still get excited about it. I still get passionate about my AA. And I seem to protect it when people try to trample on it. So that's all I got. Peace.